we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for attending this afternoon. I know for some of you, we may have seen you all week at all of our different programs, and for some of you, this might be the first one you've been able to attend this week. This is our fourth out of 5, and we appreciate you all joining us. If you were not able to join the other ones this week, but you'd still like to watch them later, they will be very likely at some point next week. They will be listed on CFNC's YouTube channel. We will have a playlist within our YouTube channel that has all of the recordings from this week, so you'll be able to watch them. Just a couple of reminders as we go into today's program. If you could stay muted, that would be wonderful. We have a good number of folks on these programs just to help with sound. Your CEUs you will receive tomorrow, so you will get a follow-up email tomorrow within 24 hours with your CEU certificate attached. Right after this program, you will get you'll have a new pop-up that opens up when you close out with a survey. We appreciate your feedback as we think about offering something like this perhaps next year. We love feedback on what we did well and what we can improve, so we appreciate that. And if you have any questions as you go through, you should see some gray panes on the right-hand side of your screen, one of which says questions with a drop-down arrow. You are welcome to send questions over, and we will answer as we go along in writing. We have different folks on with CFNC to help answer those questions today, so feel free to send those over. So let's begin. We have a variety of speakers today for you. One is Cole Justin. He's the Community Services Manager with CFNC Pathways. He's going to talk to everyone first about applications. Our second speaker will be Addison Miller, who is the Assistant Director at CFNC Pathways, and he is our transcript guru. So he'll be talking to you a little bit about electronic transcripts. And then we will have Devin McCarthy-James, who is one of our CFNC regional representatives. She has served as a school counselor before in the western part of our state. She's going to be talking about fee waivers. And then we have a couple of reps I mentioned, including Brittany Privet, who is on to answer questions, and she'll be helping with chat and the QA feature. And I'm April Query. I'm the CFNC Regional and Community Services Manager. I've been with CFNC for about 15 years, and I work with our outreach team, and I'll be serving as your moderator. Today's agenda, we're going to talk specifically about college application week as it pertains to Countdown to College as a whole. We'll be talking about applications on CFNC, transcripts, fee waivers, as I mentioned, and answering all of your questions. So feel free to send them in. A few things before I pass it over to Cole. I want to talk a little bit about some resources for the month and the week, specifically college application week. So CFN/, that's our website where you can find all of the we have a few pieces that have been cut out of that C2C page. On the right-hand side, you can see where you can learn about events that will be happening, and separately information just for schools, as well as some other resources here. We encourage you to register your site. So if you were on one of the other programs this week, we had talked a little bit about the fun I Applied stickers that we know all the students love to have. You're never too old for stickers is what we learned. And so if you're interested in having those I Applied stickers, we do need you to register your site. It's free, of course. We just like to know who exactly is going to be holding different events, especially during college application week. So if you could register your site, and we also will be providing you with technology guidelines, anything that changes. So it's just a great way for us to communicate with you as you go through the week and the month, and we can stay in touch. And we also have the Site Coordinator Resource Guide, which has been updated. These are, of course, all on the cfnc.org/c2c site. I just have a couple of a couple of the websites pulled out here, so you can always just take a picture or grab this as your handout in your page on the right-hand side also. A couple of other resources I wanted to talk about. There's a lot of resources that we have for schools. Again, this is on the cfnc.org/CCC site. Technology guidelines is a big one, so I encourage you all to take a look at that, especially if you're planning on having any in-person events. I know that many of you are. We're going out, I have one high school that I'll be going out to. So we are going out to high schools and helping where you all are having face-to-face programs during college application week. So if you have an interest in checking out the technology guidelines and making sure that all of the websites, are coming up good and you aren't having any issues before, you have all those students coming into your computer lab, feel free to check that out. And if you have any questions about technology, we encourage you to send those questions over today too. We'd like to help get you prepped for college application week and help you with it in advance. And then those colleges that are waiving fees, we have an initial list of those schools out. You can access those from that link or cfnc.org/C2C. We will have a second iteration coming out already that adds St. Aug and Shaw to the list. And the reason I say the first iteration of it coming out is we always have changes to it. We luckily always have colleges that are interested in waiving their fees for the week during college application week, and some of them will decide a little bit later in the school year that they would like to do so. So if you are going to have any face-to-face events, or if you're just going to be pushing out information about college application week to your students, I encourage you to have them look at that list of colleges waiving fees closer to college application week in case we have any changes or colleges, that have decided to waive after that initial list is out there. So I am going to stop my part and pass this over to Cole to provide you with some information on college applications on CFNC. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'll be talking briefly a little bit about college applications and how that works with college application week. So if you have any questions about the application process on CFNC, feel free to ask those as I go along. The college applications on CFNC are all accessed through the application hub, which allows students to both apply to schools and send their transcripts all in one central place on CFNC. Through that application hub, students can track and monitor application materials. Some campuses have additional tasks that can be completed for applications after the application is submitted. If there are any forms that they might want to get, if the school chooses to do so. And then also the streamlined application experience is same system and the same account that students use to fill out the RDS process. So if a student's already gone through RDS with you in the classroom or online and any activities you've done, they'll already have a CFNC account. So they'll want to make sure they're using the same account for both, because that will streamline the process for them, and the application will be able to automatically pull in their RDS or residency certification number that they got during the RDS process. So this is how a student gets to the application hub. On the main CFNC website, you'll see at the top bar, there's the Apply to College navigation. And once they click on that button, they'll be brought to this page here. It says Applying to College, and on the right-hand side, there's the orange Application Hub button. If they're already signed into their CFNC account, they will be taken right to the application hub, and if they haven't signed into their account, they'll be prompted to sign in after clicking on the application hub button. If your students are working on any applications that are waiving fees during college application week, you'll want to make sure they start on CFNC. And most campuses that are waiving their application fee are waiving it directly on CFNC. So you'll want to make sure they start on CFNC and aren't going through another application portal, whether that's the campus-specific one or Common App or another third-party application. One other topic that can sometimes cause confusion are linked campuses. And linked campuses are schools that do not have an application directly on the CFNC website. And so what that means is that if a student starts an application, and one example is shown here on the screen for North Carolina Central, instead of filling out the application, entering all the information on that application and submitting it directly on CFNC, instead they'll click on this button down at the bottom and it will link them out to another application. Depending on what the campus wants, that could be a campus's specific application that they've set up for themselves, or it could be the Common App application, whatever the campus wants the students to apply to. These linked campuses don't accept applications through CFNC, but they all accept transcripts through CFNC. So even if an application is linked, the students can still send those transcripts through CFNC for free, and those schools will all still download those transcripts and accept those transcripts as official transcripts during the application process. And then a few quick tips on the applications. One issue that we sometimes hear students missing required fields on the application. Required fields are indicated in two ways. The first is there should be an asterisk to the right of the name of the field. So you'll see here on the screen where it says enrollment term, and there's a red asterisk, and entrance status. Another way you can find required fields are by clicking the Save Application button and saving an application. If you save an application and any required fields are not filled in, it will then highlight those fields in red to make it easy to find those. Additionally, on the left-hand navigation of the application, you'll see that some sections have just a circle next to them and some have a checkbox next to them. Those with a circle mean there are missing required questions in that section or on that page, and if it has a checkbox, then all of those required fields have been filled out. So those are two quick ways to easily see if there are any required fields that need to be filled out on an application. One other thing we've had a couple of slip-ups with is if you are having students together in a computer lab, you want to make sure students log out before another user tries to submit an application. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it can cause some confusion if a student starts an application and it's pulling in another student's name. So just one thing to be aware of. And here, I'll go ahead and pass this off to Addison, but I'll take a minute to see if there are any questions. Looks like we have a question asking, is there a list of colleges with linked applications? We don't maintain a list of all of the linked applications. However, on the list of schools participating and waiving their fee during college application week, any schools that are linked are marked and specified as such on that document. So if you are looking at the list of schools participating in college application week, you'll be able to see which ones are linked.
Thank you so much, Cole, for giving us all that information. If anyone has questions about the applications on CFNC, feel free to send them over. I do want to emphasize one thing that Cole mentioned is that starting on CFNC for College Application Week. College Application Week is a CFNC North Carolina initiative. So if students are starting their application on the college's website or on Common App and then later coming to you saying, I thought it was waived, it's asking me for a fee, that my number one question for students is always, where did you start the application? You have to start the application on CFNC. If it is a campus that is waiving their fee, but it's linked, so they start on CFNC and then we take them to a different site to their application per the college's wishes or instructions. They should see information wherever they get linked to on, how to handle the fee waiver for College Application Week. But I do encourage students that if you are applying to a college with a linked campus and you're taken off from CFNC, remind your students that when they start their next application to come back to cfnc.org and start the process again through CFNC. Sometimes students will forget and stay on whatever website they're on, perhaps Common App, and start another application, and then wonder, like I just said, why it's not free when it is supposed to be free. So just make sure the students understand to start on Cfnc, come back to Cfnc. It's a Cfnc initiative. And we do have another question I'll read aloud here for Cole to see if you can assist with. Do counselors need to reach out to schools if it says that it's not waived unless they complete an additional form? So what can we tell them about having to complete an additional form if it says that it's not?
My understanding is if a school is participating in College Application Week, then they shouldn't require any additional forms. Now, of course, they might require additional forms for fee waivers, and I know we'll be discussing that a little bit later, some more details about how those fee waivers work. But if they are listed as a participating school in College Application Week, I don't believe any of those should require any additional documents to waive that fee. It should just show up as if their application's still on Cfnc, just a payment option of no payment necessary.
Yeah. Thank you, Cole. And
if you run into anything that doesn't look like that, definitely contact us. But the way we have it set up is if a school says they're participating, we just turn off the application fee during College Application Week. So if there's a school that's potentially linked, that's doing it another way, certainly reach out to us and we will connect with that school and see what we can do there.
Thank you so much. And just as Cole said, we'll have Devin will be talking about fee waivers in just a few minutes. And so we can hopefully provide you with some more information on that topic also. So feel free to send questions over. And in the meantime, we will pass it over to Addison to talk a little bit about electronic transcripts on Cfnc. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So the Cfnc electronic transcript system comes with a lot of benefits. First of all, there are no limits that you can send to our in-state colleges, all North Carolina colleges. Students can do this process themselves. They will have access to the status of their request in the application hub. They'll be able to track it through the process and be able to see when a college has received their request. From that same application hub, they should be able to see an image of the transcript. That is an unofficial document, so they won't be able to print that off and submit it themselves as an official. That is unofficial. They don't need to worry about coming back and requesting another transcript after the status on Cfnc says completed. There's usually not a lot of trouble there, but if you do run into a situation, please feel free to reach out through our support pages and we can assist with communication there. So some of the most common issues that folks run into they're usually related to a data input when they're requesting the transcript from the App Hub. The text needs to exactly match what is in PowerSchool, particularly with last name. That's capitalization, spacing, punctuation, whether that's hyphenation or periods for abbreviations. Your source of information should be that student's PowerSchool record. What is there is the only thing that will work for matching up the record for that transcript request. And make sure that the gender field selected matches what's there as well. We've had issues where something is off there, and that's just the last field you expect to check sometimes for things to be wrong, but make sure things are matching up. Do we have one more slide? If there's two kind of errors that students can receive. One is that data match error where a student ID may be wrong, or there's no spacing in between a hyphenated name. Students will receive an email indicating that they need to compare what they input during that transcript request form, to compare it to PowerSchool. They may come to you asking assistance. That's very common, but they'll receive an email instructing them on what to do. We cannot see what field is not matching. We don't have visibility into PowerSchool. However, we can see what they submitted, and if they submit a support request, we do our best to help walk them through and check the information. The other type of error is a record error that occurs within PowerSchool. Sometimes data gets input with invalid characters, or a numerical field somebody will try to put text data in there, and that will cause the request to fail as well. So that's something that the student won't be able to change on their own. There should be now a different email message for them indicating that that's the case. Most likely they will come to a counselor or a data administrator, and they will ask for assistance there. Quickly glance over the record, look for teacher comment fields. They can sometimes go rogue and enter their own comments, as has happened in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area before, where there's pre-selected messages for them to input. They'll put in bad characters, and that'll break the record. If you're not able to scan over that record and easily spot a possible source of error and have them re-request, your best option will probably be to submit a PowerSchool support ticket. As I said before, we don't have visibility into PowerSchool, so we're unable to assist when something of that nature arises. I think that's all I have. I will say that I checked the App Hub and the form. Another common issue that will pop up is as they're entering their profile data, when they request, there's a verifier for our email addresses. Sometimes it won't be able to validate the email address that they input. It's a red window, that a little red box that pops up in the bottom right hand corner. That does not mean that they cannot submit. All they can override that by just saying clicking the green Save Personal Information button, and that will then allow them to check off the boxes next to the names of the schools they want to submit their transcript to. That has held people up in the past, but it's just a validator service, just to kind of help people make sure they've entered their email address in right. It's kind of an extra warning. Are you sure this is what you meant to type in? But just be aware of that they can still go ahead and save and complete the process.
Thank you so much, Addison. And we did have one question come through that if you could address. We have a school, and this could be the same for any situation that might happen. So if we have a school that participates using the electronic transcript service, but they have any issues sending a complete transcript, or So at the time that they're applying, or maybe at the end of senior year, how do they get an issue like that fixed? What would be some instructions for them?
I'm wondering if that's for the whole school or a specific student. If
I'm just going to go back to the question. I think it might be for a specific. Oh, there, entire school. So how
okay.
might that?
Well, if you can send us a ticket with support ticket with some of the request IDs, we can look those up, and we have been going through a process with DPI and PowerSchool to correct some of the issues that we've been running into, making the process a little bit smoother for everyone. There could be something within the PowerSchool setup for the school that's generating some of those record errors, and it may help us iron out some of the things on our end if we have a few examples. If it's a school-wide problem and not just a single student, we'll definitely have them take a look and see what we can do for you.
Thank you. Would you mind in the chat, Addison, putting in the information on how to submit a support ticket?
Sure.
And then we've had just a couple of questions come through, if you don't mind. So when a student's looking, or when a counselor perhaps is looking at the transcript information, can you explain the difference between completed and pending?
So pending is the request has been queued and it's trying to complete. Sometimes there'll be on our end a connection issue in between us and PowerSchool, and it goes into a retry loop, and it hasn't reached the service yet, and it just hasn't got a response back. So that's pending. Completed is once we have made that connection, we've got the transcript data back and have sent it to the college. So once it's completed, it is essentially sitting in an inbox, waiting for the school to download it.
Yes, and to build onto that, on the application hub, from the student point of view, they can actually see whether or not it's been downloaded by a college as well. So back on the application hub, a student can see whether their transcript's been completed, and then once it's completed, it will also be marked as a downloaded, so they can know that a campus has downloaded it on top of that.
Thank you so much. And while you're speaking, Cole, I have one question for you. And I know the answer to it, but I think you can probably talk to it a little better. If a school wants to go ahead and have some students start working on their applications on Cfnc and then wait and submit it during college application week, will they be able to take advantage of those fee waivers that week? Yes,
students can go ahead and start their applications at any point before college application week, and then come back to those applications, update the payment option to no payment, and click submit, and be able to take advantage of the fee that's been waived. The only caveat to that is for some of the community colleges, since they're usually registering students closer to the when they enroll, they might not open up the fall of next year term, so fall 2022 term, until college application week. So if you do have students that are applying for a community college during college application week, they can still start the application ahead of time, but they might not see the term they're actually planning to enroll as an option until college application week. But they should all the community colleges should have a term for fall 2022 open as of college application week. But if they're filling it out now or the first week or two of October, they might only see the spring of 2022 as an option.
Perfect, thank you so much. And there's a question about when the application hub opens October. So the application hub on Cfnc is always there, and it's always open. for them to work on those applications. Countdown to College is the month of October, and College Application Week is the week of October 18th. And so that's the week where the colleges will be waiving their fees who have opted to. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to continue sending them over. And we do have a list. We weren't going to verbally kind of go through the colleges that are waiving, but we will talk about that in a few minutes. There's too many colleges kind of to list verbally, but we'll have some information on that in just a little bit. And I'll go ahead and continue answering questions kind of written back. In the meantime, we'll have Devin go ahead and start her section on fee waivers. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all that great information, Cole and Addison. Thank you so much. So we want to talk a little bit about college application fee waivers. You know, there's a lot of different waivers that are out there, and some of them are similar and some of them operate very differently. So we felt like it was a good opportunity, since of course, you know, we have our own college application week coming up, to not just talk about that, but also just to talk about college application fee waivers in general. If you are familiar with Cfnc, you know that one of our primary objectives is college access for all students and families in North Carolina. And so obviously having access to waiver programs can only help increase the numbers of low income and first generation students that are accessing college. And that's a wonderful thing to see in our state and in our country. So there are a couple of different kinds of programs, like I just mentioned. So a lot of them are need-based, and that tends to be what folks are pretty familiar with, that there is a need-based component to a lot of these waivers. But there's also some non-need-based waiver programs that we're also going to look at. And just in general, when we're talking about waiver requests, specific waiver requests, almost all of them follow the honor system to some degree, whether that is the honor system of the student saying that they qualify for a waiver, or the counselor or education professional then confirming that that student does indeed qualify for that waiver based on whatever the terms of that are. So first, yes, very excited, College Application Week. We've been talking about it all week. We're going to keep talking about it until it's over, pretty much. October 18th through 22nd, so if you don't have it on your calendar, definitely get it on there. We want you guys to make sure you're spreading the word far and wide, because this is such a great opportunity for students to apply to those colleges that have signed on to do this in North Carolina. One of the big things that I really love about College Application Week, and that I loved about it as a school counselor, was that it is an open waiver, and it doesn't have any of those income requirements, and it doesn't have anything to verify either for the student or for the education professionals. And as we all know, there are some students that don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about that they have, you know, income-based need, or they have financial difficulties. So this open waiver allows those students to apply to these colleges without maybe divulging things that they're not ready to divulge. So that's one thing that I really love about that. And I love that all students can really take advantage of this program. One key thing I want to mention, though, is that students really do need to submit that application by 5 p.m. on that Friday. Okay, so you know, there is a deadline to how long that free application system lasts. And so definitely make sure the students know that 5 p.m., that it's not midnight, it's 5 p.m. So that's one key thing to make sure that they are aware of. And also, I always used to tell students, you know, do your application ahead of time, and then you won't have to worry about just clicking submit during that week. Is going to take a lot less time than starting from the beginning of their application during that week and stressing about, you know, school and other responsibilities and finishing their application. Like April mentioned, and Addison and Cole also mentioned, it's really key that students start on that Cfnc site to receive the waiver. You know, I always tell students, just always start there, and if you need to go somewhere else, it'll take you somewhere else. And if you're going to get, if you get interrupted, go back on the Cfnc, just keep starting through Cfnc, and then you won't have to worry about it. There's a lot of great resources on that C2C page, so you can see the link over there, cfnc.org/C2C. And one of those great resources is the initial list of colleges. As April pointed out, this is sort of an evolving list, which we like because it's people signing on to do this, and the more the merrier is how we feel at College Foundation. So we are excited to keep growing this list however we can and get more of those colleges waiving their fees during college application week. I always tell students, there's got to be at least one college on here that you could see yourself at. Take advantage of those free applications and find a college, and then you've applied to college, once you finish that. And sometimes that's a major hurdle for students, is just applying to that first college is kind of a big deal, and maybe they add on other ones after that. But using this week as the opportunity to at least get one in is really a great thing. So I also want to talk about some other ways that students might receive waivers. And many of you have probably been doing this for years, so some of this probably sounds familiar, but it's a good review. If you're new to this profession, we're hoping that this will kind of share some information about all sorts of different opportunities. Generally speaking, institutional waivers go through admissions offices, and that can look a variety of different ways. Some admissions offices have just no fee applications. You're probably aware, but North Carolina community colleges do not charge a fee for their applications ever. So that's really great. But we've also got some four-year colleges or other two-year colleges that might waive those fees or not charge a fee to begin with. For instance, some schools might have, time-limited programs, or they just might never charge a fee. This year, we just recently heard that Western Carolina University is not charging an application fee for this application cycle. So that's very exciting. That's a popular four-year university that is not going to have an application fee this year. And so if there are other ones that you hear of, definitely share those out far and wide, because you want students to take advantage of those. Another way that students might get a waiver might be going on a campus visit or even a virtual visit. Sometimes in those virtual visits, they'll give students a code that they can input into their application to perhaps get that waived. So that's a really good opportunity, obviously, not only to connect with the college, but also, get that incentive to connect to the college by getting that free application. Some colleges also have special applications where they invite students to apply, and if they do take advantage of that special application, then they have that fee waived. Some of those are earlier applications, some of them are just in the regular application process, but obviously that's campus specific as well. Those are special programs led by each specific campus that wants to offer something like that. And then, of course, if that student or that counselor really is sort of at a loss, but really feels like a student needs to have that fee waived in order to apply to that college, there's no harm in calling and asking if they have some sort of special application or, again, campus visit waiver, things like that. If they have opportunities where they are just able to waive it based on the counselor saying the student has need. So there's not a downside to reaching out to those campuses just to ask that question. The worst they can say is no, and then we figure something else out. The other thing I wanted to point out is that we have, I'm so sorry, I went ahead. We have a couple of special events sometimes that happen, either nationally or locally. And these are a couple of special events that kind of came across my radar. The Latino College Expo and the Black College Expos. Some of these are face-to-face and some of them are virtual due to the pandemic, but students can actually get waiver codes when they go on to these expos, or either they attend in person, or if they attend one of the virtual ones. Some of those colleges will actually either give college application waivers, or even some of those colleges will be able to review a student's credentials and offer initial admission, like sort of a conditional admission in those meetings as well. Now, keep in mind that these are national. We don't have any stops in North Carolina, but especially since they're virtual now, it might be a good opportunity for some of our Black and Latino students to get on these virtual platforms and just, explore and see what's out there. So when we're looking at need-based waivers, this tends to be the thing that folks think of most when they are looking at college application fee waivers. And I thought it was helpful to review what the criteria are, although many of you are probably fairly familiar with this already. This general need-based waiver criteria is used by most, if not all, of the waivers that use a need-based system. Okay, and so the left-hand side shows that USDA Food and Nutrition Service income eligibility guidelines. And so that's sort of the basis for a lot of the other criteria, which is why I thought that was helpful to share, just so you can kind of get a mental picture of what we're talking about. So for a family of 4, that would be a little over $49,000 annual income. And so just to get your head around like what that might look like. Of course, free or reduced lunch program, that is either the student is enrolled or eligible to be enrolled, which I think is a really important distinction. Again, sometimes we have students who don't necessarily, students and families who don't necessarily want to share their financial difficulties and thus are not enrolled for the free or reduced lunch program, but would be eligible, certainly. So, that's definitely something to think about when you're looking at who qualifies for a waiver. If the student receives public assistance, the family receives public assistance of some kind, lives in subsidized public housing, is in foster care, is a ward of the state or homeless, of course, and then enrolled in a program aiding low-income students. So some examples of that might be Gear Up, TRIO, Upward Bound. Out in Western North Carolina, we have Project Discovery. So those kinds of programs, if a student's enrolled in that program, then they would qualify. Now, the key is that many of these need-based waivers will say, but it has to be a student who is actively enrolled in that program, not just students who may be in that same school who benefit from that program. So that's a distinction that they do make. And then again, if their income falls within those eligibility guidelines. Now, one of the things as a licensed school counselor and somebody who had worked in the schools in that role, that I always sort of wondered how other counselors handled these conversations. Because like I said, some students don't necessarily self-identify, and we, as school counselors, you may not have access to the majority of this type of information. So that's something I wanted to kind of put out to the group while we're talking about these need-based waivers, is if you could go in the chat, in the questions, and just share any tips that you have, especially you seasoned counselors and educators out there, about how you handle these conversations, or if you have a system for identifying or targeted interventions for students who might qualify for these, need-based waivers. We would love to hear those and lift those up and share those with the group. So please feel free to drop those in as I'm kind of talking about some of those things, and we'll pause and share some of those as we get a little bit further in here. So the first need-based waiver is going to be the ACT waiver. So the ACT offers unlimited college application fee waivers, and many of the waiver programs have kind of changed over the last several years to having sort of a more open system where they weren't necessarily saying you could only have this many waivers. So I'm glad to see that shift, definitely. And so eligibility is if a student has already received an ACT test waiver, or if they haven't taken an ACT test with a waiver, but they can still meet that need-based eligibility criteria that we talked about a second ago, they can still receive a college application waiver. The waiver for ACT is actually a physical well, it's not a physical piece of paper, it's a PDF that you can either complete on the computer or print it out, but it does need to be signed. So if you want to fill it out first and then print it and sign it, you can do that. But the student signs and the high school official, usually a school counselor, will confirm that eligibility and then send that on to the colleges. Now, keep in mind, as for all different kinds of need-based waivers and other waivers, college policies themselves will vary, and college waivers themselves are often honored, but it is a request, not necessarily a guarantee. So if the college does have a question about that student's eligibility, they can come back to that student and ask for additional documentation or something. That is very rare, but it's worth pointing out that that is, it is a request, not a guarantee. The other one, the other testing related waiver is College Board. You're probably familiar with that. They, I had a little trouble finding their exact number of waivers. I did call and confirm, though, that they are unlimited college application fee waivers now, and their eligibility is based on that SAT test. So the student needs to have taken an SAT test with a waiver in order to receive all sorts of waiver-based benefits on College Board, including this college application waiver. There's no additional verification required because of that, because the counselor has already verified in the initial testing waiver process that they qualify. So that's kind of nice. It takes one more step off of the student and off of the counselor in order to, for the student to access that. And it's nice that they're delivered to the student on their College Board account for them to access. Again, college policies will vary, but College Board is nice because they actually have a search on College Board where you can see which colleges will all honor a College Board waiver. So I thought that was a pretty nice thing to be able to look at, and it may say any conditions that the college has as well. So they may accept it, but only accept it under certain scenarios or conditions. So it's helpful to look at that, particularly if the student is flying out of state. They might not be as familiar with those colleges, or you might not be as familiar with how those colleges handle waivers like this. Now, since we're talking about College Board, it's worth mentioning the Css Profile. So again, if a student takes the SAT with a waiver, they then qualify for a waiver for the Css Profile if they are looking to fill that out. There are 5 colleges in North Carolina that ask for that, but obviously this is a national program. So, there's going to be colleges across the country that may ask for that CSS profile, and so this is automatically waived if students have taken the SAT on a waiver. However, with the CSS Profile, you also can, if you've never taken a College Board test or an SAT test, you can still start the profile. And because the profile is actually asking for financial information, those questions in that profile assess the student's eligibility for the waiver by itself. So if they qualify, it's going to be sort of through that process of filling that out, and that a student can receive a waiver that way. So another waiver that's out there that you're probably familiar with is the National Association for College Admission Counseling. And so this is another waiver that's sort of almost built on the back of other waivers in some ways, in that if you've if the student has received a waiver from the SAT or the ACT, then they're eligible for this waiver as well. They also add the economic need component of, are they eligible for the Pell Grant? And so if the student has already filled out the FAFSA and has that information that they're Pell Grant eligible, that is a criteria to qualify for them for the waiver. Now, in this case, the student completes the waiver form. It is a PDF or it can be printed, and then a school official or community-based organization official verifies their that they qualify on the form. However, NACAC has said, in the past year that, due to hardship and quarantines and schools being closed, that if there is a hardship on getting signatures, for instance, if the student is having trouble, getting a counselor signature or, vice versa, that they've been encouraging colleges to accept that form, even if it's missing a signature, because they really do want to encourage colleges to be flexible during this time especially. Some other programs I think are really great through NACAC that I wanted to mention is they also have transfer application waivers. That is a separate waiver. So if you know a student, maybe a former student who wants to transfer into a different school, they do have transfer application waivers, but they're different from the initial enrollment waivers. So just know that, or the initial application waivers. And then there's also enrollment deposit waivers, which again, later in the process, we have students who cannot necessarily afford to put in that deposit to hold their spot. So I think that's a really great thing to remember as you get into spring, when students are, needing to commit to school so that they don't lose their spot and they can, do all those fun things that are associated with enrolling and putting in that deposit. And again, those college policies are going to vary. So, depends on the college, what they're going to look for, what they're going to accept. So it's often a good idea to talk to the college ahead of time just to see what kinds of waivers they would prefer to see. And then, of course, there's national application waivers. So through the Common App or through the Coalition for College app, students can also, request waivers, but they handle things a little bit differently on each of these platforms. So I felt like it was worth, just reviewing how that looks. The students request the waiver in Common App in that profile, and then, of course, counselors are asked to confirm their eligibility. What's nice is, again, this is sort of piggybacking on top of the ACT or SAT. So if they've taken a testing fee waiver, check, they're sort of done. That's, their need-based component. But if they have not done that, you have a little bit of flexibility here, because the Common App says that you can just provide a supporting statement from a school official that financial circumstances would pose a major barrier to applying to college. So that's very helpful, because that really opens the door to a little bit more of a broad definition of who meets that need-based criteria. And so the counselor does confirm that eligibility in the Common App and submits anything they need to submit if they need to. And then the Coalition App Waiver it's got some pretty neat programs on there. So first, it is the student actually answers questions to see if they qualify for waivers at different colleges. So the colleges on Coalition for College have inputted the circumstances under which they will accept a waiver from a student. And so students answer those questions and they can see which colleges they would qualify for waivers at. Now, they have two different ways you can qualify for waivers. It's not only need-based. So if you qualified for an ACT, SAT, or NACAC, or meet the other need-based criteria, you can qualify for a waiver with colleges on there that have said that that's something they accept. Or if the student is a current or veteran in the armed forces. So that's a kind of a neat program that they have, that it's kind of is a standout program from some of the other waiver programs. And one other thing that the Coalition for College does, which makes counselors' lives a little bit easier, is again, there's no verification required. So that is handled with the students on the honor system, and they identify and give the information to Coalition that they need, and counselors don't need to do anything with that information. Now, this is not a waiver. And so I preface this by saying this is not exactly a waiver, but it is a very affordable application. And so I did really want to point out that we've got this great program that is fairly recent, last few years, but it's $20, a flat rate to apply to 65 HBCUs across the country, including the North Carolina HBCUs that you see on that screen. So that is awesome. I love to see things like that. They don't have a waiver process per se for that $20, but they do have sponsorships, which is pretty cool. So say, you know of an organization, or, some sort of charitable organization, a church group, maybe they can sponsor students from your school that want to apply to HBCUs. And you can easily create an account and upload a certain number of, pay for a certain number of applications, and then you get codes to share with students, and their application is then essentially waived through that sponsorship. So there's some pretty cool things to recommend that process. The student does choose their top 4 colleges to apply to in that system, though. So just know that other colleges that are not the top 4 that student chooses, Some of them will review that student's application more seriously than others. So if the student is interested, truly interested in more than that top 4, they should just give a call to that college and give them a heads up that they definitely would love for them to look at their application through the Common Black College app. So I just thought that was a great opportunity to share with y'all in case you had not seen it yet. And this is a document that we just created to sort of help you with this process. So obviously, it's a lot of information on the previous slides that I went through, but when you're going through the process of doing the actual meeting with students and trying to get them the help that they need and for different circumstances, et cetera, we really thought this would be a helpful document just to kind of understand what the eligibility is, what your role is and responsibility is, and what other programs each of these organizations might offer that might be beneficial to students, and then the link to that information. So you'll see on the right-hand side of that column, all of those are linked to the information about how those application waivers work for each of those organizations. And then in that last, if you see in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the ACT has 2 links. That's because the first one is the information about the waiver, and then the second link is actually the waiver itself. So it's the way that it's laid out. It wasn't really clear where the waiver itself was, so we tried to add that for you so you could just pull that up if you needed it. That should be linked in the handout section for y'all to pull up and save and use as a clickable PDF. But we're also going to be putting that on the Education Professionals and the Countdown to College pages as well, so that you can find that when you need it in those conversations. And so that's it for waivers, but I did want to pause and see if maybe April or anyone wanted to share anything or pose any questions that came up in the chat.
Yes, thank you so much, Devin, for all of that information. I think that the folks that are on today, that information is going to be extremely helpful for them as they go through the application process with their students. We do have one question about fee waivers. Devin, if you're able to assist, are you aware, or do you know if it's accurate or true that if your whole school is free lunch, that students must meet a second requirement to be eligible for those fee waivers?
That's a good question. I have heard of that in the past. I have not worked for a school like that, so I can't say with 100% certainty, but I have heard of that before. I've heard other counselors mention that because everybody qualifies, everybody qualifies, right? So since everybody qualifies for free or reduced lunch, that everybody qualifies for the waivers. But I cannot say 100% certain, because all of the information on the different organizations' websites does not handle it on a group basis, right? It handles it on an individual basis, and they're pretty specific about when students are at a school that has like a low-income program helping students, such as Gear Up or any other TRIO programs, things like that, that the students who who are benefiting specifically from that program are the ones that can use that waiver, not necessarily other students who have vote necessarily by the don't know, but that's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. If you all want to continue to send over your questions, please do so. Devin, can you move on to the next slide? Do you mind? You've got the PowerPoint. And while you move on to the next slide, I'll just mention a couple things as I think about what we've gone over today, which I know is a lot of information. Some of you may have been on the first program that we did on Monday that was about some C2C basics and Professional Center or Pro Tools. Remember that in Professional Center, you're able to do tracking for transcripts that are sent over, as well as applications. You can also run reports on applications that have been submitted by your students. So you do have access to that information. If you are unsure how to access that, feel free to reach out to one of us. In just a couple minutes, we'll have a slide that gives you everyone's contact information again in case you missed that from the beginning. So you can reach out to us and we can help you with that. And you're also welcome, as I said earlier, if you were not able to attend Monday, at some point next week, we will have that information on our YouTube channel with the recording on it. But the slide that Devin has up right now, just as a reminder, we do have one more program tomorrow morning, and the title of it is College Access and COVID-19, Keeping Students on Track and Excited for Post-Secondary Education. We're going to have some different mental health tips, self-care information, just some general information about hopefully keeping your students interested and excited for college. And we'll also have the financial aid director at UNCW in attendance, and he's going to talk to us a few bits about financial aid, but we're also going to be providing some information as it may relate to college access and give you all an opportunity to ask any questions you might have. We're going to talk about food insecurities, you know, all of these different things as your students are transitioning from high school to college to help sort of alleviate any issues they may have, or help give some tips at least for issues they may have as it relates to mental health and COVID-19. You know, we can provide, the reason we're providing that program tomorrow is that we can offer a countdown to college, and we can offer, you know, college application week, as you know, as we did last year with COVID. But if we don't have our students excited to complete the college applications, or if they're still having, you know, issues because parents are out of work and they're having financial issues at home, which is why we brought in the financial aid piece tomorrow, or, you know, parents, family members have passed away, that we've still got students that have so many other things going on. And so we felt that it was important to bring this piece into it. So maybe we can have some conversations about getting students to work on those applications during college application week and submit RDS and send their transcripts and all those other things that we've talked about this week. So that'll be tomorrow morning at 9. If you haven't registered yet, there's the link to register. We encourage you to do so. And you are welcome to continue sending questions over. As we said earlier, you know, cfnc.org/C2C to find all of the information and to get any updated fee waiver list that we have out there for the week. Feel free to reach out to us. And Devin, you might, if you can, well, I'm not sure if you can go backwards here. I think I can, I'll share my screen again, so that way we can provide that slides with people's contact information in case anyone wants to reach out to see how we can help you. We do have virtual offerings during the month of October. So again, make sure you head to cfnc.org/C2C to see the virtual programs that we will have during the month of October. We did this last year and we'll be doing it again this year. We have a week, that first week in October is dedicated to planning. And so we'll have some different resources that week. We'll have a week that we offer resources on financial aid and residency. And then obviously the third week in October is college application week. And then the fourth week in October, the theme is I applied, now what? And so we have two things going on that week. The first is a presentation where we will talk a little bit about, okay, I did my applications, I've submitted, you know, my RBS application, I did my FAFSA. So now what do I expect now that all that stuff is done? And so we'll have that one evening for families. And then another evening, we're going to have just a free-for-all that's just open line where they can call in or send messages, use a chat feature, and ask a lot of questions about, you know, the process as a whole. So anything they have that's related to, you know, college access, we can answer those questions. So I can't encourage you enough to visit the website to try and, you know, get some of those tips and all that information about what we have going on during the month. Does anyone else who's on, any of the presenters or CFNC folks that we have on, did anyone have anything else they wanted to add this afternoon? Nope. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. As I said in the beginning, in about 24 hours, you will get a follow-up email with your CEU certificate. and then you will have an evaluation that will come up after this. Feel free to fill that out and give us some information about how we can improve or what we've done well today or this week. And hopefully we will see some of you in the morning for our final program. And we truly appreciate you joining us this afternoon, and we hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.